and 34.
Sound convictions combined with humility in our interactions and actions is a good approach to the world. Words of wisdom by Sri Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO of Zoho Corporation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have, we have the honor of having a man of great achievements and a person with utmost humility. A rare combination indeed. The staff and students of PSG iTech are immensely happy to welcome Sri Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO of Zoho Corporation, as a distinguished speaker as part of iTech Dialogue. We are very privileged to welcome Padma Shri awardee Sri Sridhar Vembu. On behalf of iTech Dialogue, I am happy to welcome Sri L. Gopalakrishnan, Managing Trustee, Dr. A.V. Varadarajan, Founder and Chairman, AVV Groups, Mr. Anand, CB Garments, Mr. Soundar Rajan, Managing Director, CRI Pumps, all the invitees, Dr. D. Brinda, Principal, PSD CAS, Heads of PSD institutions, Dr. P.V. Mohanram, Secretary, Dr. G. Chandramohan, Principal, PSG iTech, Professor Architect G. Tamilvanan, Principal in charge, Heads of Departments, Faculty, Staff, and students of PSG iTech, PSG Tech, PSG CAS, and PSG IAP, and present media for this momentous occasion. Sri Sridhar Vembu's reputation precedes him, hence introducing him is a challenge. He belongs to a very modest middle-class family. He started his primary education in a government-aided Tamil medium school and then moved on to IIT Madras for his undergraduation in electrical engineering. He obtained his MS and a doctorate from Princeton University. He built his company Zoho that has been profitable from day one without any external funding. A man of great convictions, he stuck to the concept of bootstrapping and Zoho reached $1 billion valuation, making it a unicorn. Zoho is a unique and powerful software that contains invoicing, note-taking, web conferencing, wikis, word spreadsheets, presentations, databases, project management, and much more application.
He founded a company that could empower the youth of India. As he rightly put, it has to come from the heart and has to mix with the substance of your business plan effortlessly. Everything that emanates from him comes from his heart. That is the secret of his success. Now, his company competes directly with industry giants such as Microsoft, Google, Oracle, Salesforce.com. Sri Sridhar Vembu's journey is truly remarkable as he has achieved great heights while strongly holding to his roots. The heart of all his ventures is rural revival and technological self-reliance. He started Zoho Schools and Zoho University to train young minds of the nation to face challenges within the country and globally. They are also paid a monthly stipend during the training period. These students are trained with all the real life and practical challenges that a developer or software engineer deals with. Zoho University has trained more than 300 students over the last decade, most of whom are now Zoho employees. This is a thoughtful and wonderful initiative to reach out to students in rural areas.
It is an honor and a privilege to invite Sri Sridhar Vembu, one of the biggest social entrepreneurs, to share his journey and expertise.
Thank you. எல்லோருக்கும் இனிய காலை வணக்கம், நமஸ்காரம். இவ்வளவு பெரிய கூட்டம் இங்கே வரும்னு நான் எதிர்பார்க்கல. இது much bigger than I thought. இந்த ஆடிட்டோரியம் ரொம்ப imposing. It's probably the largest auditorium I have been in. So it's very impressive to see this architecture, all of this, and there is a school of architecture, and I think some of you are students here too. In fact, எனக்கு பார்த்த உடனே ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இன்ஜினியரிங் கொஸ்டினே இவ்வளோ பெரிய ஸ்பேன் எப்படி கான்க்ரீட்டில் வரும் அப்படின்னு. That's what I wondered about. First thing பார்த்த உடனே, how large a span can you build in concrete அப்படின்னு. அது இன்னைக்கு சாட் ஜிபிடியை கேட்கணும் அடுத்தது. How large a span can you build அப்படின்னு in concrete? I'm sure some of the architecture students will know the answer, but I have to find out. So I'll start off with that. So to me, this institution, this is the foundation of all of Coimbatore industry, this whole region, right? And this region is very prosperous. In fact, I said about 4 months ago, there was a news circulating. The GDP per capita of this region is higher than even Chennai. So this is one of the, probably the richest region of India now, today, already. Or maybe in the top 2 or 3. So then where next, right? That is a critical question facing us here. We are still globally, if you compare to a Taiwan or South Korea or Japan or Switzerland, Germany, all of these, we still have a way to go. So our per capita GDP might be $5,000-6,000 here. So those are $50,000, $60,000. So that's a 10-fold jump from here. On the other hand, if you compare our per capita GDP to, say, a poorer district in eastern UP or in Bihar, it may already be 5 times larger, 6 times, 10 times larger, somewhere there. So you can see both sides. Compared to the very poor areas in our own country, it might be 5 to 10 times richer. Compared to the richest countries, we are 10 times poorer. So you can see that is this type of knowledge, this understanding, these numbers. To me, this is not economics, it's actually engineering. Understanding these numbers, I said about the span. How large a span can you build? How large a GDP can you build? Why is Switzerland's GDP $100,000 per person per year, while we are at $6,000 per person per year? What makes Switzerland tick? And what makes Taiwan tick? Why is TSMC, the largest semiconductor company in the world, is in Taiwan? Why is it not there in Coimbatore? These are the questions I keep asking myself. So the all of Zoho Corp is a product of those questions repeatedly over the years. I still ask those questions. So, you know, you said $1 billion revenue. Well, Microsoft is at $200 billion revenue. Google is at about 230, somewhere in that, 200, 220 billion revenue, somewhere in that. Apple is 400 billion revenue. So you get the scale of this business, both the information technology, software, all of that, you get the scale. So we are actually a tiny company. We are only 1/200th the size of Microsoft today in terms of revenue, 1/200th. We are still the largest product company out of India, but Microsoft is 200 times bigger in revenue. Apple is 400 times bigger in revenue. Why is this important? You have to understand these orders of magnitude very well. In fact, I keep in our own school, in our Kalaivani Kalvi Mayam school, the one thing I drill to the young students is understand orders of magnitudes. Understand what it means to be 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Not 10% bigger, 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger. Understand those numbers. To me, all of engineering comes from that understanding of numbers. All of economics comes from understanding those numbers and the meaning of those numbers. Now, I'll give you one more number. Recently, I've been very exercised about this number. So we think now software engineers' productivity can jump 10-fold, maybe 100-fold. The analogy I've given in our company, and I actually am now started saying this in public too, we have handloom weavers, then the power looms get invented. Now we have airjet, all of that. The productivity gain could be 100 times. The same weaver can do 100 times the output of cloth. So this is what, I mean, this whole region is full of the textile industry. So you all know this history well, or you should know. So when this industry came to be, the power looms, all of that, a lot of the traditional weavers went out of business. Why? The productivity jumped 100 times, but the demand for clothes does not go up 100 times. The demand for clothes maybe goes up 10 times. See, all of us have 10 times more clothes than we need, most of us, right? Our closets are full of clothes because somebody keeps gifting shirts or pants or whatever, t-shirts. You go there and randomly you'll buy a t-shirt and maybe you buy a sari or whatever, right? So we have a closet full of clothes because they are so cheap. They're so cheap because the productivity in making those is so high. And the same kind of productivity leap is coming to software. So unless the demand for software goes up 10 times or 100 times, not very likely in my opinion, the software demand, Microsoft is not going to become a 2 trillion company in revenue from 200 billion. It's unlikely. In other words, the demand for software will not jump from 200 billion for them to, maybe it could go to 400 billion. But I don't think it goes to 2 trillion. When productivity goes up much higher than the overall revenue in an industry, jobs go down. That's the problem. And that is, which is why you saw about the ChatGPT, Elon Musk, everybody is exercised about this problem. If you do the numbers, you'll immediately realize the implication. In fact, I am telling this to our engineers all the time now. We must understand this. What happens to jobs when productivity goes that high and the demand is not that high? So this is a key point to understand. All of you, the number sense is important in this. That's why I quoted this. So these are the kinds of challenges now we are wrestling with right now in our industry. But I'll step back and I'm going to give you the challenges I want you to address from PSG Tech, from in Coimbatore, from the broader PSG ecosystem here, all of this. So set yourself a target. How do we become world class? How do we compete with the Taiwan here? How do we compete with the South Korea here? How do we compete with the Japan from here? That is where you have to set your target, not how do we compete with Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is competing with us and taking away our jobs now. Which, if you are in the textile industry, you know this very well. In the garmenting industry, Tirupur, you know this extremely well. The tailor salaries here are 4-5 times that of Bangladesh. And maybe 10 times that of what it is in Kenya, the textile industry pay now. So which means that our textile industry has to move up the value chain. That's how they call it, to compete. So where do we move up? Where do we go? Well, there is Taiwan, there is South Korea, there is Switzerland. So we have to figure out how to compete with Switzerland, how to compete with Germany now, how to compete with the Taiwan, how to compete with the Japan. Because Bangladesh is there to compete with us. That is how and it's not just Bangladesh. Eastern UP is looking at our jobs here. Because there will be now businesses that arise from Eastern UP that are looking at Coimbatore and saying, how do I compete with this company in Coimbatore? Their labor costs are higher, much higher. That's how this whole industry goes up, and it's similar in software. Today, software services, India is no longer the cheap place to develop software for a lot of industry now. Pakistan is lower, Sri Lanka is lower, Bangladesh is lower, and they have smart people. They are willing to work for less because the dollar goes much further there. It's 80 rupees to a dollar here, 280 rupees to a dollar in Pakistan. So that's you see that again. So these are the economic challenges I want you all to understand. If you take one thing, the way an engineer becomes a businessman is to do the numbers, understand the numbers, that's all. Understand these numbers, what it means. So how do we move up the value chain? And this is where I always quote Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man. He formulated this thing called, your margin is my opportunity. He just one sentence captures it. So how does he look at a business model? He's looking at somebody who's making a lot of money. It might be Google, it might be Microsoft. And he's looking at the margins they are enjoying in it. He looks at it as an opportunity for Amazon to compete. Curiously, this is the same thing I had come up with 20 years ago in our company. I told our people that we have to look at companies that are at a higher productivity than us, see how do we compete with them. So look at companies that are higher productivity, how do we compete with them? That's what I said. So we looked at companies, no, we'll examine 10, 20 companies, engineers, not economists, not business people, not MBAs, engineers. We'll examine these companies, we will identify their products, we'll identify their productivity. The productivity for us will be a revenue per person or value addition per person. That's a little subtler metric, but revenue per person will do. You look at revenue per person, identify companies, look at which companies that we can compete with. In fact, when I was in Tirupur, I told the business people, so your competition is Bangladesh, right? No, your competition is Germany now. That is how you should think. Because when you think of your competition as Bangladesh, you are at the race to the bottom. When you think of your competition as Germany, you are racing to the top. Would you rather be racing to the bottom or racing to the top? That is the question. And how do we race to the top? Well, identify the machinery in your factories. Those are German made. How do we compete with them from here? And therein lies the secret to unleashing the next tenfold productivity. And that is, I believe, the only path, only sustainable path for this region to prosper much, much, much more. And the potential is there. The potential is immense. All of you represent that potential. This entire room here could create 10 billion of value in the next 10, 20 years, if you set your mind to it. You are all some of the smartest people of this region can produce, our state can produce, our country can produce. You have it in you. And you have to think about how do the Germans do it, how do the Taiwanese do it, and set that as our goal here. And that is what I've relentlessly taught in Zoho. That's all I've taught. What I've taught is, let's look at Microsoft, let's look at Google, let's look at Facebook. How do we compete with their products? How do we produce those products? How do we beat them in quality? How do we beat them in scale? And that relentless thought applied over 10 years, 20 years is what gets you results. And that is what is ultimately the secret to R&D. And this R&D investment, I'll give you some numbers. A typical high margin industry, a Google or Microsoft or any of them, their productivity per capita, per person productivity is $1 million per person per year. $1 million per person per year of output they produce. Our software services industry would be lucky to do about $50,000 per person per year. That is a 20-fold difference. So 50,000 versus 1 million per person per year. And if we don't compete for that 1 million productivity job, we settle for the 50,000 job, Pakistan will take away the 50,000 job from us because they will compete for that job next. So this is what we have to realize. This is the fundamental economic principle. There is no secret here. That's how economic transformations happen. And we can try stopping it by saying government put a rule, law, all that. But an American customer can buy from us or buy from Pakistan. How are you going to stop them? The Indian government cannot stop that. So which means that we are in this world where we have to learn to compete for these. So we have to set our competition as Germany next, as Switzerland. And in fact, Coimbatore region, I'll tell you, to me strongly resembles, in a way, the Switzerland as a nation. And if we consciously think of it that way, our institutions are built that way, how do we compete with Switzerland? How do we learn from them and compete with them? In fact, competing with them is paying our respect to them. That's what I always tell our engineers. By competing with Microsoft, in a way, we actually pay our respect to them. In the exact same way, in our tradition, the Eklavya paid his tribute to Dronacharya by learning from him and competing with him. Right? That's how you should think. And that is how I always think. I actually look at this as Eklavya, where you learn from the Dronacharya, but you also are competing with Dronacharya. It's there in our tradition. This is there in our Mahabharata story. And that is how I want this region to look at a Switzerland, look at a Taiwan, all of this. For this, if you look at those high-value industries, they are investing more than 20% of their revenue in R&D. 15-20% is invested in R&D. If you look at our industries here, I think the ratio would be like 1 or 2%. The all India average is only like 1% today. So we have a very long way to go to match the R&D prowess of those businesses there in Switzerland or in US or in Germany or whatever, right? And that in Zoho Corp, we are spending more than 25-30% in R&D. So that's the only secret. There is no big secret here. We are investing 20, 25%, 30% nearly in R&D, while the Indian average is 1%. So this investment is absolutely necessary. And the R&D can happen in companies, but in collaboration with university, the college. So I would like actually every industry to have an arm that is working on these R&D projects. Critical R&D projects, you formulate those projects. So what are those R&D projects? It's not just software. In fact, I want us to look beyond software alone because, as I told you, software is subject to now disruption today. So you cannot just rely on software alone to power our growth. This is something that I've been telling our government too, saying don't just over-rely on software alone. We need to diversify our industrial base massively. And this region already has a very good industrial base. We have to scale it up. We have to deepen the technology. So what do I mean by deepen the technology? I would look at every piece of machinery we import today. Every piece of machinery, every last one, I will look at how do we make it ourselves. And what are the engineers required? That could be mechanical, that could be electrical, that could be electronics, all of that. Within that, I'll give you something that I personally, my hunch right now, my conviction, but I am investing in this area. The idea that I see is capital goods, the factory goods, are going to become cheaper through technology upgradation now. The transition I see is the mainframe to PC. Your factory capital goods are still in the mainframe era. And they are going to come to the PC era and the mobile phone era. That means smaller scale capital goods that can do the job of a much larger machines much cheaper. How a PC and a mobile phone can do the job of what mainframes used to do, that thing is coming to the capital goods sector. That's my belief. And if we can invest in this, then we can leapfrog the competition. We can move over what Switzerland is at, what Germans are at right now. And again, this requires sustained investment, sustained focus here. And this requires businesses, universities, colleges, all to work together. And this institution plays a vital role in this. This institution is very vital to create that type of a future, where we invest in R&D heavily, we create these projects, we consciously decide to look at what the machinery we are using ourselves and figure out how to do better than that, how to build it better. And this is how the Japanese did it, by the way. Japan's entire history was this exact idea. I'll narrate a couple of stories. One professor from Japan visited us in IIT Madras in 87, 88. I was a student between 85 and 89. And this professor was teaching some guest lectures, and we were electrical engineering students. We were in one of the lectures, one of the classes, and he looked at we were holding these mechanical pencils. And he called one of the students and looked at the pencil and says made in Germany. He said, you know, in Japan, we'll feel ashamed. We will ask, why are we not able to make this mechanical pencil in Japan? This is the question we will ask. And he said, you engineering students in India should ask this question. Have some pride in your own country, ask this question. That's what he said. He said this back in 1987. This lesson actually stuck in me. It is probably the only real thing I got out of all of those years of IIT was this lesson. As engineering students, you should have pride. Why is this not made in India? Keep asking that. And I still ask that, by the way. When I ask any piece of machinery, any camera, any medical equipment, anything, I ask, why is this not made in India? Why can't we make this in India? And the jobs puzzle automatically answers itself. If we make it in India, there won't be any jobs problem at all into all our engineering colleges, south, north, east, west, anywhere. So there's all those things that we use today. If we make it, if we figure out how to make the machinery, how to make the technology, that will suck all of the talent we have. So there won't be any unemployment problem at all in our country. What it requires is the vision to do this. And that has to come from entrepreneurs, it has to come from engineers, it has to come from faculty members too. Even faculty members have to enable their students to dream. Start small projects, maybe 3-month project, 6-month project to figure out some sensor. How do we measure pressure better? Find all the sensors in the market today. They could be very cheap sensors, you know, $10, $5, $3 sensors. Buy a few, figure out how to make it better. That could be a 6-month project, and then go float a company. to do this. That's how this is done. That's how actually, you may think I'm oversimplifying, but that's actually how it's done. You figure out a better strategy and read everything, soak up, simulate, write code, figure out, and you will find a better answer within maybe 3 tries, 5 tries, 8 tries. Or you will find a better answer to some other problem using this problem as a starting point. That has happened too. தமிழில் சொல்லுவோம் இல்லையா, பிள்ளையார் படிக்க குரங்காய் முடிந்த கதை அப்படின்னு. இன்ஜினியரிங்கில் அது அடிக்கடி ஆகும். We start a project and that objective is not met, we spin out a different product from that project. The product that we did not anticipate in the beginning. It has happened repeatedly for me. We work on some R&D. The output is a product that we did not anticipate. The original objective is not met, but a different objective is met, and we make that our target. And then there is a joke in US, they call it a Texas sharpshooter. You know, the guns you shoot for shooting range, the Texas sharpshooter joke is that you fire the gun, take the bullet hole and draw a circle and call it, you met the target. In other words, where the bullet goes, you draw a circle. Actually, in business, that's a very good strategy. Whatever comes out is whatever is supposed to come out. Wherever the bullet hits, that is the target. So that's how often happens in R&D. You have to realize that this is very all too common in R&D. All too common. I have seen this 50 times already, where some project's outcome is a different product than I envisioned, but still good. That's a good product. We'll ship it. So that's, again, keep that in mind. And so you have to have that open-minded exploration and curiosity. I'm endlessly curious. Which is why I said, how do you get this span? I'm going to challenge our own civil engineers and architect to find what is the largest span you can build. Some civil engineer has to answer this for me. Hopefully, some of you will answer me this today, after this. Maybe in your Q&A, you are going to answer this. What is the longest span we can build in these kinds of things? I don't know what the span of this is. Because, it used to be that you'll have columns in the middle. And this is a quite long span for concrete, right? How long can you go? It's a very useful question to ask. And this is what innovation looks like. Next stage, somebody will figure out even longer span. How do you build these safely? All of those are the innovation questions. And how do you 3D print houses? In fact, I am interested in not these large structures, but smaller structures, homes. In fact, one of my passion now is 3D printed mud houses. Why mud? Because mud is actually an excellent material for protecting you from the heat. I actually have a home now which is built of mud bricks, with mud, not the baked mud, not single, very mud. And this mud, much cooler. It feels like you are inside an AC room. If you go into the building, it looks cooler. So for our climate, mud houses are very good. And we can make it very modern. By the way, if you come to that house, you'll see that it's modern. It has all the modern amenities. But can we 3D print a mud house? Use mud as the material. So those are the kinds of, again, that's innovation right there. Somebody could be inventing that. So smaller scale first, larger scale, then 3D print entire neighborhoods. Buy some 5 acres somewhere, build an entire neighborhood, and those could be very cheap, very affordable housing, very beautifully, aesthetically done. So these are the kinds of innovation I want to see from civil engineering, from architecture, and this is multidisciplinary. Again, this is another thing I'll tell you, all of the technologies here. All the future challenges are multidisciplinary. How to bring software into civil engineering, how to bring software into medical instruments, and how do we bring this technology, cross-fertilize this with the other. Some chemical engineering to information technology, how do you cross-fertilize, create new class of sensors? That is where I see the challenges. For example, how do you detect arsenic in the water? If you are going 500 feet, 1,000 feet for water, you are going to get arsenic in the water. So you want to detect that. So arsenic sensors and safety of what you drink is important. So these are, again, food safety. How do you create cheap sensors that detect pathogens, detect the contaminants in your food? Those are all opportunities. And then combine it with IoT. And that becomes software enabled then. And you have a smartphone that gives you an alert, your water is not good, your food is not good, whatever, right? It gives you a report immediately from your phone. So these are the types of things that are cross-disciplinary. This is where I see the most progress ahead. For this, you have to think outside of your boundaries. Why am I, a software engineer, worried about span of buildings? Why am I worried about sensors, arsenic sensors? Why am I worried about biotech? Or why am I worried about battery life for an electric vehicle? So those are the kinds of things that is going to create progress for us. And we can leapfrog because we are still enough relatively favorable demographics. I'll tell you the disadvantage of Japan today, hardly any young people. Same thing with Korea. Same thing with even Germany, which is why they are all desperately importing our talent. They're desperately looking for our talent because their pool of young people have dried up. We still are in a demographically favorable situation in India. And so we must use this youth advantage to dream bigger and invent our future. And if we do this, India will be the richest nation in the planet. I assure you, we have that potential. I could see it. I want to see it in my lifetime. I want to see us emerge as the richest nation in our planet. But, thank you, that entirely is in your hands. All of the young people here, it's in your hands. You must first believe. In Zoho, I'll often say, we must first believe that it's possible. When you're going to start on a software project, I'll say, the first thing is not, do we know the technology? The first thing is, do we have faith? And it is no different than religious faith, I tell you. Engineering is not engineering. Science is not rational that way. It is actually religious faith. We must have an absolute conviction, faith that we will get it done. Somehow we'll get it done. So that faith is required. And most recently, I'm very, personally, I was involved in this effort. We created a new language and we had to bootstrap it. Bootstrap means the compiler written in that language. Those of you in computer science may know this. That's a very difficult thing to do. The language doesn't exist, how do you write a compiler in it? There's nothing to compile that yet, right? So we have to somehow do bootstrapping here. And when I started this project, I told our couple of engineers, this is going to be very hard, but we'll get it done. It will happen. And we had setbacks, we had delays, we got it done. It happened, it worked. It was actually very, very amazing to see. And the most important leap actually happened by a Zoho Schools of Engineering student who was hardly 20-year-old. He made that last piece of breakthrough on it. 20-year-old student, exactly like any of you here. So that's why I say it is possible. You must believe. In fact, it was said that 300 students overall. Actually, we have about 2,500 employees from Zoho Schools over the years. Our annual intake today is 300 students. This year, we are taking about 300 students per year. That is our Zoho Schools number now. And we are expanding it. As the company grows, we are expanding it further and further. Why? Because for every one of you who can afford to be here, there is 50-60% of the population I know in these villages that cannot afford to be here at all. That's the people that we don't see in this. And those are the people I'm trying to catch. Because that's the demographics we have to, if we want to be a developed nation, that demographic has to be served. The people in those villages, the kids born in those villages, in those last villages. See, in Tamil Nadu, you have two kinds of villages, I call them. The main road village and the interior village. You will see a distinct difference between the two. The main road village feels reasonably developed. You go to the interior. Interior does not mean some 50 kilometers, 10 kilometers, 8 kilometers. You go to the interior, you see a different village completely. Very different. And those are where the kids are born. Those are where the kids are. And they have to travel 8 kilometers for a school, often. 5 kilometers for a school. To go to a Tamil medium school, they have to travel 5 kilometers. And those are the kids I want to catch. Because that's where I want to create the future next. And that's where I feel the demographics is coming. Meaning all of you come from, most of you come from maybe the main road village now. What about the kids in the interior villages? So that's why I am looking at that problem. That's why I moved myself in an interior village. And my own personal focus is what to do about how do we create education, how do we create healthcare, all of those there. This is very, our beloved President Abdul Kalam ji had already said this pura, providing urban amenities in rural areas. That was his vision. It's possible. It's actually possible. I'll tell you why it's possible. I'll give you again numbers, right? The population density of Tamil Nadu is about 500 to 600 people per square kilometer. Every square kilometer, 1 square kilometer is about 250 acres, give or take. So for every acre of land, we have about 2.5 people here in our state, 2 to 2.5 people. That's our population density on average. And if you look at the population density of Silicon Valley, what is known as Silicon Valley, which is an urbanized region, it's not considered a rural region, the population density is about 500 people per square kilometer. So all of Tamil Nadu has the population density of Santa Clara Valley, which is considered mostly an urbanized region. So what does that tell you? This interior village is not that interior at all, actually. The distances are very short comparatively. You're talking about 5 kilometers. If we had good roads or good trains, in Japan they have trains everywhere. Every interior village in Japan will have an electric train serving it. It's actually possible in our nation. It is very possible for every panchayat, every interior village to be connected by electric train. This is the kind of vision we must have as a nation. We will build those trains. We will build those. Those are jobs. The signaling systems, highly automated trains, those are again jobs. That is again technology that untaps the potential in those villages, that unleashes the potential, that's the right word, unleashes the potential in those villages. And we need that last mile connectivity. Today, luckily, fiber optics comes to my village. That's 300 megabit per second I get. Those 300 megabit per second is better than what I used to get in Silicon Valley. So I get a better connection here in India than in Silicon Valley for a lot cheaper. I pay, 1,500 rupees or something. Definitely less than 2,000. And for that, I get 300 megabit per second. And so that is why I'm able to work out of that village. Because I have a 300 megabit per second connectivity, and that's enough for me. That's about the only lifeline. I can live without food, but I can't live without bandwidth, right, as they say. So that is the lifeline for me. For a software engineer, that's what you need, right? So now we can spread infrastructure like this. It is coming. I see the government, in fact, if you look at our railway budget, it has massively increased in the last 7-8 years. So it's clear that whole railway spread of trains everywhere is important. It's also very green because trains are the most energy efficient form of transport. So we need a lot more trains. And that, again, it has a social impact, which is nobody is now trapped in those villages. They can travel, they can take jobs 20 kilometers away easily. They can commute to those jobs. So I can put our R&D center in Tenkasi is about 25 kilometers from my village. That R&D center, our villagers now to go, the bus service is very, very poor. There's only like 2 buses in the morning, 2 in the evening. It's very poor. But now if there is electric trains, it will be suddenly a much different atmosphere, and the commute will be a lot simpler. So these are, again, you can see that how I think, and I gave you the number behind why I believe it's possible. Our population density is about the same as Silicon Valley for all of Tamil Nadu. In fact, UP's population density, Uttar Pradesh, is actually much higher than Silicon Valley, the average density. So there are really no rural areas in our country when viewed from that perspective of population density. The density of population is actually about the same as what we consider urbanized suburban areas in the US, which tells you that there are no rural areas in our state, in our nation, which means that we can plan this whole country as a very distant collection of these suburbs where trains go everywhere. That's how I think about it. Because given our population, 1.4 billion people, this is actually very possible. Because the population we think of as a burden, it's the same population that will build the trains, build the tracks, build all the bridges, everything, right? We have the population for it, so we can do this. And that is, so these numbers again, I gave you the population density numbers. So in anything, ultimately it is your understanding of those numbers that allow you to formulate rational strategies. The scientific model, technological model of anything is a model with numbers. Your ChatGPT is converting all your text into numbers, and it is doing computation on those numbers. So everything is numbers. You have to see the world in numbers. That's all I do. I'm actually not much of a businessman, but from childhood I had a fascination for numbers, mathematics. So and you can develop this. It's not like numbers are not my friend. Don't say it. You can actually easily develop this. Because the kind of numbers, the number sense I'm talking about is 4th standard maths. I'm not talking about advanced calculus. I'm not talking about algebraic geometry, any of that. I'm talking about basic 3rd, 4th standard arithmetic. division, multiplication, all of them. So develop that sense, ask questions, and you will get that economic understanding, you will get business understanding, and don't think I'm an engineer, I don't know business. I could have given that excuse myself. I have no business background at all. No family background of business. Nobody I knew was a business person. And why did I get into business? I got into business, I tell you why. I analyzed these numbers, and I realized the only way out of poverty is to actually get into entrepreneurship, which this region very well knows. So many industrial titans have emerged here, and they are the ones who made this region prosperous. This very college, all these buildings we are sitting on, is because of the vision of one man who had the vision to build all this, vision to donate so much of his family wealth to this charity. Without it, this institution doesn't exist. And the wealth came from industry. So you can decide what wealth are you going to create, how are you going to share it with our broader society. And if you have the number sense, you can do this. Trust me on that. So that's all I had to say now, and I'm now open to questions. Please ask me tough questions today. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have compiled the questions sent to us by PSG iTech, PSG Tech, and PSG CAS students. Sir, with your kind permission, we would like to pose those questions to you.
Please.
What were the challenges you faced initially while starting your company?
Yeah. So the first challenge is actually overcome ourselves, right? You are what they call in English the imposter syndrome. That means, why do I think I can be a businessman? In fact, my mother would have told you, oh, you will not be a businessman. You are not a good businessman. You don't know anything. Even now, my mother tells me that, by the way. Even now. My mother thinks that, actually, she doesn't think how I can run a business. Seriously. Not in a bad way. She wonders, how is it possible for you to run a business? Serious. So that, in the beginning, that question is more important. Now, at least, I don't have to worry about that question. But in the beginning, even that question would worry me a little bit. So you have to overcome your own personal challenge of, can I be in business? And how do you overcome it? This is how I thought. I look at Bill Gates. I look at all these people. I look at, these are all geeks. These are all people who are obsessed about software. They don't look like businessmen. So I can also be a businessman. There's no template for a businessman, okay? There's not a template that to be a businessman, you ought to be good at this. There are actually highly introverted people who are extremely shy, who cannot speak 3 sentences. They are excellent, outstanding businessmen. So don't tell yourself those stories. That is the key. So that's the first thing. So you have to overcome your own those self-doubts. That's much more important than any other hurdles. Once you overcome that internal hurdle, the external hurdles slowly melt away. That's how I see it. Thank you.
So we know you are a great fan of bootstrap startups. And why do you prefer bootstrapping over liquidating your shares?
So actually, I'll give you the Japan answer here. The model of liquidity, all of these, is a very much an American recent last 30, 40-year invention. If you go back to America 50 years ago, this was not common, even in America. And America was already the richest country in the world, most industrialized country in the world, with the most sophisticated technologies at their disposal. They had sent a man to the moon. This was 50 years ago, right? Actually 55 years ago. And at that time, none of the liquidity, all of this was happening. Companies would go public, but very, very late. Maybe after 30 years of successfully running, some company will go to public. There's no concept of liquidity. There's no concept of striking it rich. There's no concept of unicorns. All of these arrived in the last, even the word unicorn was invented in America only 12 years ago, for your information. So, in fact, I'll give you today, in fact, I was going to tweet this, I didn't have the time this very early morning. Larry Summers, I'll give a long answer to this. Larry Summers, who was a Harvard president, a very brilliant economist, potentially a future Nobel laureate in economics. He also served as the US Treasury Secretary, the equivalent of finance minister under Bill Clinton. So he was a Harvard president, economist, Treasury Secretary, all of this. He tweeted this morning this. He said, US life expectancy has dropped so bad now in the last 10 years. It is now 5 years behind UK in terms of life expectancy. Americans are dying at a younger and younger age, and 1 in 25 kids will not reach the age of 40 in America today. But current trends continue. 1 in 25 young Americans will not reach the age of 40. This all happened in the last 10 years. And I've been observing it. Actually, I said this 10 years ago. I said this in an interview. The Harvard Business School and the Soviet Communist Party are intellectual cousins. They will meet the same fate eventually. I actually said this to Harvard Business School professor, by the way. I said that you will meet the exact same fate as the Communist Party of Soviet Union. Why? Why am I so strongly convinced about this? And Lawrence Summers said this today in the tweet. He said, he was the president of Harvard. He said that these trends are so disturbing, America is going the way of the Soviet Union. He said this. This morning, I was going to retweet this. It was shocking because I had said this 10 years ago, that US risks going the same way as Soviet Union. And in fact, you might find Soviet Union and America are polar opposites. Actually, there is unfortunately in the last 20, 30 years, deep similarities have come. What is the similarity? The Soviets believed in statistical, numbers-based management of everything. I talked about numbers all the time in my talk. I also talked about faith, religious faith. You remember? You throw away that faith, you only rely on numbers, you will become Soviet. And you will also reproduce modern America, all the ills. Because ultimately our human values don't come from numbers. Our being human is not coming from numbers. We have to have faith, we have to have belief in higher powers, we have to believe in beauty, belief in truth. All of those things are not just numbers, not just economics, not just GDP. And this sense has been lost in American companies. The classic example of this is liquidity, because we think of companies as disposable commodities. We go create a company for sale. And what happens when you do that is, well, some people get rich. What happens after they get rich? The company is burdened with high expectation of having to perform to that valuation. Suppose that I sell Zoho for $30 billion today, suppose, just for a, well, I get 40 billion, 30 billion, whatever. But the employees now have to work hard to justify the 30 billion paid to me. Do you realize? And the next 10 years, 20 years, they have to create those 30 billion of value. And that is hard. When you set up that high a burden, it becomes hard. And those companies become soulless. They become very numbers driven. Every month, every quarter, you have to perform. And this pressure, you add up, you get this low life expectancy. All of those ills come from American corporations becoming finance addicted, financialized, that's the term. This trend has arrived in India. It has come to Bangalore. I totally do not believe in this. This trend will not lead us to a rich nation here. This trend will lead us to the same path America is following, which path Lawrence Summers this morning tweeted is the same path Soviet Union was on. This is shocking, coming from such a leading figure in America, leading thinker, Harvard president. He was the president of Harvard University. He is a Nobel laureate level economist. He was the Treasury Secretary, the equivalent of Finance Minister under Bill Clinton. He is saying America is on the same path of Soviet Union. And I'm telling you that if we follow all those recipes, liquidity, IPO, obsession, unicorn, all of this, that's where we will head. That's why I didn't take this company there. I realized this early on. I lived in America for 30 years. I could see, in fact, there was a chart, very interesting. Approximately the time I entered in 1989 was in a sense a peak in America. It was actually peak in many, many respects in terms of social indicators. For example, inequality exploded after that. 89 was a very equal society, much more equal society than what it became later. So it turns out that year was the peak in the social equality. And since then, inequality has exploded in America. And along with it, all those evils, young deaths, gun violence, drug overdose deaths, all of these are taking more than 250,000 Americans per year. That's almost 7 or 8% of the kids born every year are dying of these at a young age. And the mirror image of that is the obsession with liquidity, all of that, because what has happened in America, and I said this to my American friends all the time. In Silicon Valley, I would say this in public events. I would say the American elite have lost touch with your own society. You have forgotten your own bottom 50%. And there are more Indian poor people from poverty in India are doing very well in Google. People from poverty in America are not doing well in Google. They are not even in Google. So why is that? Why does that happen? How does a poor country send its children to work in Google? Why does a rich nation not able to help its own poor? These are the questions I asked them to ask. I said, ask yourself this. In fact, I used to joke once, why does Bill Gates obsess about UP? He should obsess about Mississippi. I used to say this. So that's my answer, long answer to that question. So I don't believe that this path to liquidity, unicorn, all of that will produce sustainable prosperity. If you look at companies in Coimbatore that have done well generation after generation, they didn't obsess about all this. The founders, the founding families were committed. They thought of it as a trust. They thought of it as an institution. They have to build long term. They were not here to take the 20 billion or whatever, run away somewhere. With that attitude, we cannot produce lasting companies. So that's why I didn't take the money. Thank you.
Sir, so the next question is, like if you get a chance to tell something to your younger self, what would it be?
Yeah. I'll probably be a little bit bolder than I was at that age. So, because I didn't know. I didn't know you could be bolder. So what does bolder mean? Maybe more ambitious projects and even bigger scale software projects. We did some, but we could have been even bolder. But, you know, in real time at 30 or 35, it's hard to do this because we were the only company doing R&D in all of these areas in all of India. The only email system produced in India is us. The only chat system produced is us. Aratai now we have, and Click is our Zoho system. And so in many, many fields, the only company that is actually competing with Microsoft, able to compete with Microsoft, winning deals against Microsoft today from India is us. So in a sense, it's like a lonely existence because you actually don't even know if it's possible. At the beginning, you have self-doubts. But in hindsight now, I know all those doubts are resolved. I would say I'll go tell myself, if I travel back in time, be even bolder.
So the next question is, how did you come about the name Zoho? What does it mean?
You could ask ChatGPT for the answer. It will give you 10 versions of it. So, how many of you have not registered for ChatGPT yet here? Okay, so please go do it, because do yourself a favor. Explore the potential of AI, the most highest advanced AI. If possible, even get the paid account, because that is GPT-4. It's mind-blowing, this progress in this place, to the point where I tell our engineers, we should not take our jobs for granted. We should not take our software engineering jobs for granted. I tell our engineers today. So it's important for all of you engineers to realize the potential of it. Zoho, it came from Soho, small office, home office. We put a Z because that's cooler. So you need a cool brand, right? So I always joke, I am not cool, but the company has to be cool, right? Yeah.
Sir, how is success and failure defined in your dictionary?
So, to me, success is actually if I have a very satisfying effort I put in something and I learned something out of it. Success is not just the product succeeded in the market. That's a narrow definition of success. Success is also, hey, we attempted this. It's hugely satisfying that we attempted this. We tried our best. We learned all this. To me, that is in self a success. So that's how I define it. Failure is the failure not to try. The failure starts before you even tried. If you choose not to try, as they say, right, if you never tried, you are always going to fail because you never even tried. So failure is the failure not to try.
Sir, you were a boy who went to a Tamil medium school and later you got a PhD from Princeton University. How did this journey happen?
So until 10th standard, I was in Tamil medium and my English was poor. But in 8th standard, I taught myself using the grammar book, Wren and Martin. I accidentally found it. There's a story actually. In 8th standard, I visited a relative, distant relative, and I was in their house. The machu nu Tamil, machu. Dusty, So I was exploring it as a young boy. You know, young boys go and climb, and I found an old Veena, and I found this book, Ren and Martin. The old Veena, I tried it, it broke the strings. So I said, God, I already broke something there. And then I took the book, and the book was very dusty, dog-eared, as they say. It was in the machi for a long time. They said, you can take this book if you want. Nobody is reading it here. It's there in the machi. So that book was fascinating for me. In fact, my interest in programming languages probably came from that English grammar book, Ren and Martin. Because I actually spent 3 months looking at all the grammar patterns. It's a grammar book. It's not an English book. It's a grammar book. It teaches you English grammar. And so I went and studied it. So actually, by 10th standard, I could write good English. I could write, but I could not speak anything. So I learned to write it. Then only after going to IIT, I learned to speak haltingly. Because all my classmates come from much, much better schools, right, as they say. So they all spoke fluent English, so I have to learn now to converse. That's how I learned.
What motivates you in your journey as an entrepreneur?
Right now, the motivation in the very beginning was, how do we feed ourselves and our team? That was the first motivation, right? We have 10 people, and I would say, I'll assemble our engineers and say, our grand challenge is how do we put food on the table? So I won't give an engineering challenge. I would say our grand challenge is how do we put food on the table? But today, my personal challenge has evolved. I want to see how I can lift up one district, maybe 2, maybe 3. If I'm too ambitious, maybe 10, to the level of a developed nation in our country. One rural district. I say rural, that's my goal now. So, in fact, I have said Tenkasi district, which is very rural, and Tanjavur district, which is very rural, both are a lot poorer than the district. You will see it visibly. You visit, you know. Then both Tenkasi and Tanjavur is even poorer. And then there are districts even poorer than that, in Tamil Nadu alone. So you visit those, my heart weeps when I see this poverty. And I feel really, really bad. I feel like I have failed personally. I feel like I have not done anything. So that's what I want to see if 3 districts, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can do. That's my goal right now. And business is the path because I tell you, if we are at 100 billion revenue today, our state would be as rich as South Korea or Taiwan. One company, 100 billion, it reaches. It won't be one company alone. Because if we reach 100 billion, there'll be a lot of other companies that will reach 10, 20, 30 billion easily. We will easily reach the South Korea level. So that's the path out of poverty. Business is the only path out of poverty. And the key to business is R&D in technology. We don't reach 100 billion by simply only building factories. We have to master the technologies behind all those factories. So that's the path.
So what are the skills that you expect from job aspirants?
The skill set I expect is that curiosity and passion and commitment. I actually don't look for, do you know Java, do you know this, do you know that, all that. If there is that curiosity, that passion, commitment, I tell you, our managers, many of our managers, go to engineering colleges, usually rural ones, which will be there in their own region. They'll go to engineering colleges near their own hometowns. These will be very humble colleges where most of the students will never get jobs. So they go there, they'll volunteer, they'll teach some, one semester of some evening or classes in Saturdays. And you see which kids are showing motivation. That some 40 students will show up, then 3 weeks later 20 will show up, and because they realize that this has nothing to do with their exam, right? And then 1 month or 3 months later, maybe 10 will show up. The remaining 5 are the ones you end up hiring because they are the ones who stuck with it. They showed the potential, they showed the passion, they showed the commitment. That's the kind of people we want. Thank you. Stick with it. Stay the course, as they say.
Sir, which entrepreneur do you admire the most?
Today I've got to say, I have seen Elon Musk's evolution in the last 20 years. From PayPal to Tesla to now even Twitter, as much as he gets criticism. But also the man is a genius. Hyperloop. And Hyperloop is one of the ideas that I'm actually also interested in. SpaceX, of course, a lot of people point to. But I'm more earthbound. I'm more looking at what we can do on this earth, not what on Mars. Mars can wait. Maybe Mars can wait another generation for me, but we have to fix the earth right now. So those are the ideas that I see.
Sir, as we encounter economic growth, we can also see that the culture is destroying.
Yes.
How can we stop and keep the culture?
This, actually, I will tell you, I talked about America, right? I talked about the 30 years of what I witnessed. I could visibly see the country steadily deteriorate. It was very sad to watch. I actually admire America. I admired the America of before. It's a country, very smart people, hardworking people built that country. And I saw that steadily, slowly, year after year. Universities, great universities are no longer great universities there. They become shells. You go look up a video in Stanford what law students recently did to a judge they disagreed with. Pathetic behavior. These are law school students in one of the best law colleges in America, Stanford Law School. And look at the video, it's there on YouTube, all of this. It's very sad to see. They disagree with the judge, that's okay. But they were expletives, they were shouting at him, yelling at him, they won't allow him to speak at all. And it was very, very bad behavior. And it's a judge, the High Court judge, the equivalent of High Court judge in America. Respectfully, they can state their viewpoint, but there was no respect there. So what happened? Why did this happen in America? And that, unfortunately, I'm telling you, we are at risk of copying all the bad ideas, almost none of the good ideas from America. This whole liquidity, this unicorn culture is actually something we copied. Those are not good ideas to copy. We should copy their industriousness. We should copy the can-do culture, the spirit of optimism. Those are the things I would copy. We should copy their informality. See, in Zoho, everybody calls me by name. Where did this come from? That came from America. In America, everybody calls their boss by name. Okay? They don't use sir, any of that. So that is something that is there instituted in Zoho. In Zoho, we have a very informal culture that came right from the classic America that I admired. But today, that country is slowly destroying itself. I'm afraid we are copying the bad parts. We are copying the bad parts because we are not discriminating what is good and what is bad. We must be able to discriminate. And second, we also must be rooted in our culture, in our soil. There's the reason I dress like this, because I dress like my villagers do, my people in my district do, people in Tanjavur do. Most of them are still dressed this way. Why do I dress this way? Because I want to show that you can do technology, you can do all this, you can do mathematics, you can do all of this while being ourselves. We don't have to lose us. This is important. And the most important, I tell you, this country's biggest riches is not riches at all. It is the spiritual wealth we have produced. The older I get, the more I realize how important it is. Because money is not going to make us happy. Money is only going to give us ever more paths of, or as I say, money won't make you happy. It lets you choose your own form of misery. That's a joke, right? Lets you choose your own form of misery. But the key out of that money trap is actually have that spiritual grounding. And ultimately, all our saints, all our yogis, Swami Vivekananda quote. Swami Vivekananda said, selflessness is God. God is selflessness. So we have to imbibe those values, those spiritual values that has been there for thousands of years in our soil. We have to imbibe those values and we have to serve. So the more money I make, the more I realize my duty to serve this country. And I don't mean, duty to serve does not mean government, all of that. Duty to serve means in our villages, in our districts, in our neighborhoods, that is how I want to serve. And this we have to have in our sense. And if we have that, we want our culture and all that will be intact. So that spiritual core is necessary here. Thank you.
So every entrepreneur will have some ultimate goal for his company. And what is yours?
Well, I'll give you Jeff Bezos joked about it. It's a good one. See, I take somewhat of a Buddhist attitude about this. The Buddhist attitude is to realize everything is impermanent. Obviously, our bodies, everything we create, everything there is an impermanence to it. So, Jeff Bezos was asked, do you think someday Amazon will decline? He answered, it's actually a brilliant answer. He said, it surely will decline. I just hope that it's after I decline. I am past. In other words, it will decline someday. I just hope that it's after I die. So in a way, that's always true, okay? We have to be aware of this. It's not, nothing is ever permanent. I mean, I visited the Gangaikonda Solapuram 10 days ago. It's a 1,000-year-old temple, most of you would have known. This is the son of Rajaraja Cholan, Rajendra Cholan, built a temple as grand as his father's. And that's there near my village, it's about 10 kilometers. That was an inspiration for me. But where is the Chola Empire? Where are the descendants of Rajaraja Cholan here? We don't know. Gone to the wind, as they say. And that whole area, you cannot find anything, and you dig, you find the remnants of palaces. You find all of those, they call it Maligai Medu. Maligai Medu is the palace, the palace has gone into the sand. So you can see this. Everything comes to an end like that. So the ultimate goal has to be that. We cannot aspire to anything more, and we have to be at peace with it. Because, you know, Steve Jobs said it. Steve Jobs, actually, again, a great philosopher, he said this: the thought that I am certainly going to die one day is the most liberating thought in the world. Then I remove all fear from me, because I think I'm anyway going to die. So what am I afraid of? You only die once. He actually said this. So that's why I personally think the ultimate goal cannot be anything more than death for all of us, because that is the ultimate goal, right? In a sense. But during that life, we have to do some good. So I won't give the ultimate goal, I'll give the intermediate goal, which is try to do some good. So, thank you.
Sir, and the last question is, what do you consider to be your greatest competitive edge?
My greatest competitive edge today is that I don't have any fear. I'm not afraid of Microsoft. I'm not afraid of Google, any of this. Because there is, if you live like you have nothing to lose, you really have nothing to lose. So I actually don't, I'm not, you know, I'm personally, I live as simple a life as possible. There are some trappings that come with my position. I have to travel with security, all of that. If I'm not in that position, I won't need security. But because I'm in this, I have to have security, all of that. If not those for trappings, for example, I still like to travel in a passenger train or bus, all of those. These days, I'm not able to do it because sometimes a crowd will assemble, I have to have security, all of that. But that's the life I'm used to. So I have nothing to lose. If nothing is there, I will go back to that life. So that's why I'm not afraid, and that is the biggest competitive edge against Microsoft. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I request you to stay on stage for felicitation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I request Dr. A.V. Varadarajan, founder and CEO of A.V. Groups, to felicitate our guest speaker, Sri Sridhar Vembu. I also request our secretary, Dr. P.V. Mohan Ram, and our principal, Dr. G. Chandra Mohan, to join in the felicitation.
Sri Sridhar Vembu has articulated very well about his life's purpose. Our purpose has been to create opportunities for those who don't have them, build compelling products for our customers, and serve geographical locations that have not been served before. He is a visionary who identified that the need is to create our own value system, which is not imported or borrowed from Silicon Valley in the US. His firm conviction is that we have to build companies that are suited to our conditions. His mission is to bring our rural youth into the mainstream by providing them with necessary skills so that they could be brought into the technology spectrum. He has the wisdom to acknowledge the limits of technology while accepting that technology is vital. He has uplifted the lives of so many young people in rural areas and hired students from impoverished schools who were intelligent but had to drop out due to financial constraints. Having such a humane person here today is a very humbling experience for all of us. I express my gratitude to Sri Sridhar Vembu for spending his time and sharing his journey with us. We have to develop knowledge, and humility is absolutely essential for that. This comes from a man who is humility personified. Thank you, sir, for being the person you are. Resilient today, stronger tomorrow. Very true words, sir. You're a living proof of this. Thank you for your presence today and for patiently answering to all of our questions. I thank all staff and students of PSG institutions for making use of this opportunity to listen to one of the most successful entrepreneurs, an entrepreneur with a social mission. Thank you all.
I request everyone to be seated. Please wait till our guest leaves the hall.